Now 6:02, and my name is Chris Spiss or Christina Spiss, whichever you like. And I am the chair of this committee, and I'd like to welcome everyone. The first thing we always do at our meetings is to read, generally at our board meetings, but when we have a public committee meeting such as this, we read the mission statement. So here it is. I'm going to read it um, to move things along. Uh, the purpose of the Pacific Palisades Community Council shall be to, one, be a forum for the consideration of community issues, two, be an advocate for the Pacific Palisades to government and private agencies upon issues where there is broad community agreement, as reflected by two-thirds of the board members voting on any of those issues at a PPCC meeting, and three, assist other organizations in the Palisades which want help in accomplishing their objectives or projects, which PPCC determines to support. So that is our mission statement. And with that, I'm now going to introduce LUC members, which basically will be calling the roll. So first, just to introduce myself, I'm the at-large representative to the board. I'm also a former president and a longtime board member and also a retired attorney. We have here, I know Reza Akev, he's a Palisades builder and a longtime former PPCC board member. Reza, can you wave your hand? Where are you?
I'm here. I'm
Okay,
driving, but I'm here.
okay, great. Um, we don't, James Alexakis is a member, but he's not here, I don't think.
No,
James?
no, I
No.
haven't seen him.
Okay, Michael Edlin, who is a Palisades Realtor and first alternate at-large representative, my alternate. There's
Uh,
Michael.
I'm here.
Okay, great. We have Howard Robinson, who's a retired land use consultant, very valuable to us on the committee, and a former PPCC board member. Where is he? I know he's here.
Here.
There he is.
Yeah.
We have Joanna Spack, a retired Disney executive, right, Joanna?
That's correct.
And she is second alternate Area 1 representative and another longtime board member. There's Joanna. I don't see Miriam Czar. She's a member, but she's not here. We also have with us our ex officio LUC member, which is Sue Cole, PPCC president, longtime board member, and also a Palisades realtor. So there you have it. We have quorum, and we're now going to proceed with the agenda. So item one is a presentation and discussion about the proposed mixed-use project at 15113 Sunset Boulevard in the Commercial Village. So we are pleased to have with us here tonight owners Brad Keys and Josh Steinsipper. Do you want to wave or say hello? There
Hello.
you
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. We also have the project architect, who's Andrew Alper of Design Arc. Is that right? Okay. And then we have Nick Leathers with Crest Real Estate, who's a consultant to the owners, right?
Yep.
Where's
Nice to
Nick?
meet you. Thank you for having us.
Okay, great. So I want to emphasize that the owners were not required to attend, but are here voluntarily to present information to the community. So I want to thank them for being here and being willing to answer our questions. Before beginning with their presentation, I'd like to briefly set the table. So bear with me. First, I hope everyone has now seen and reviewed the PPCC preliminary report about the project and applicable laws. I believe the document addresses most residents' concerns, but just to be clear about a few things. First, this is not a housing project. It's a proposed 6-unit apartment building with 1 unit reserved for very low income residents under applicable state density bonus law. Two, the density bonus law is a state mandate that supersedes local zoning and specific plans. Three, the owners here are entitled under state law and Los Angeles City land use regulations to certain quote unquote incentives and concessions, including increasing project density in exchange for providing the very low income unit. And by the way, I know our representative here, Nick Leathers, is going to explain all of this or even correct me where I'm wrong. Lastly, four, the applicable laws provide no exemption for the very high fire hazard severity zone. By the way, as I was speaking, Mariam Czar, I believe, entered. She's another one of our members. Mariam is Chair Emeritus of PPCC. She's also the CEO of Palibu Chamber of Commerce and founder of the Palisades Recovery Coalition. So there you go. I'm going to say just a few more words. PPCC, I want everyone to understand this. PPCC supports the right of owners to build according to all applicable laws, but we do recognize that safety is paramount. We support the rebuilding of existing affordable housing in the Palisades, including the mobile home parks and the apartment building at the corner of Palisades Drive and Sunset. At the same time, we oppose legislative mandates that increase housing density in the very high fire hazard severity zone and thus present a grave risk to public safety in terms of blockages of our limited evacuation routes. This one particular 6-unit building may not appreciably add to the risk, but the LUC is concerned about many more such mixed-use or multifamily projects that may be proposed along Sunset Boulevard in the coming months and years, increasing the public safety risk from greatly added density. As a practical matter, however, it appears that not much can be done to prevent such increased density going forward. But in the meantime, it's going to be important to hear now about the proposed project of 1511 Sunset. So, Nick Leathers, do you want to begin, please? And I think you have screen sharing if you like.
Yeah, I'll get started. Yeah, thank you guys so much for having us, and I appreciate all the well-attended meetings, so it's great. But yeah, my name's Nick Leathers. I work with a firm called Crest Real Estate. We're a land use consulting company, and so I'm the representative for the owners, Brad and Josh. They own the site here. At 15113 West Sunset Boulevard. So I'll spend about 5 or 10 minutes. Is that okay? Kind of walking
Yes,
through the plans.
sure.
Okay, cool. So just for context, here's the site. It's a fairly small, just under 5,000 square feet site. It was a two-story commercial building that obviously, burned down in the fire. But Brad and Josh, they bought the building, I believe, in 2021. So it was one of their commercial spaces. It was originally 2 stories and it was built in 1958. So it has frontage along Sunset and then parking along the back alleyway. And so over the past few months, we've been working with Josh and Brad to come up with a new development for the site. And so there were a couple of options that they were thinking about. One of them, as you probably know, is Executive Order number 1. So that would allow you to rebuild exactly what you had plus a, a like 10% more additional square foot. But in this case, they have always, had intention in mind to build maybe one level of apartments on top of the site, but keep the ground floor commercial. So, um, and so in saying that, EO1, we would not be eligible to use Executive Order 1 if we introduce a new use like the apartment units. So there's 6 units proposed, and one of them is a very low income affordable unit in the project. And then as you can see, there's around 2,500 square feet of ground floor commercial space and then parking along the back alleyway on the surface parking lot. In terms of where we are, we just filed the case pretty recently, just before the holidays, so in late 2025, and it's been assigned to one of the local Palisades planners. So we're very early on in the process. We just got our what they call like their incomplete hold letter. So basically, planning took a first review of the plan set, and these plans are actually the latest version. So we just got done updating a couple questions and comments that planning has had so far. And so we're submitting this back to planning, and really this is our first meeting with any outreach. So um, once we get a little further along, I think planning will then proceed to the design review board. So the site is in the commercial village overlay zone. So it's just really just properties that are commercial along Monument and Sunset and De La Cruz. So um, With that, we are using density bonus to not increase the density on the site. It's really mostly to deviate from a lot of the development standards that are part of that village zone for the village area. And so the site, typically you could build, you know, 6 residential units on it with no entitlement or special approval from the city. So we're just mainly using density bonus to allow a feasible site on the property that, you know, otherwise wouldn't comply with maybe like the height for the village area zone and other things like maybe setbacks. But I did want to clarify the density is being built to what is allowed today on the site. So just with that said, I'll go down to a couple more renderings as well and give you another view shot. So as I mentioned, the project shows here, this is, you know, facing Sunset Boulevard. It's a 3-story building. And so the upper 2 levels will be the residential apartments, and every apartment will have a balcony. So there's going to be this, 3 units per floor. So on the front side, you have 2 units facing here. Each of them has their own balcony, and the balcony is recessed. So we did our best to step the building back along the street with that. But otherwise, the parking remains along the alley, which is pretty consistent with the village pattern. And then there'd be a couple bike parking stalls on the sidewalk along the two new street trees. Here's just a couple more renderings, elevations that you can see. So we haven't gone to the design review board process yet, and so there might be some other tweaks here and there to the changes, but it's mainly stucco and metal accents, and then there's transparent storefront glazing at the ground level. So. And then this is the back of the building along the alleyway. So this would really follow the same layout that was there before the fire. So before there were 5 parking spaces. Here we're hoping to provide 6 parking spaces. So there'll be accessed by 2 different ramps here, as you can see, and these are standard spaces. We have ADA accessible space, and then we have EV charging as well. And then so you would enter the building from the back. These are stairwells that go up, and then these are the 2 back units along the rear. And we come back to this shade shadow study. But in terms of our site plan, so as you can see here, the left is Sunset Boulevard. This would be the 2 different entrances for the ground floor retail space. We're not quite sure about the exact use, but it will be commercial. We have a 2-foot setback that complies with the village plan. And then as well, there's a central elevator, trash recycle rooms. There's the egress, exit stairway, and then bike storage along the middle of the building. And then along the alleyway, again, are where those parking spaces are. And then our second floor, so each floor has 3 units. So there's 2 studios, 2 1-bedrooms, and 2 2-bedrooms. So this is the studio, the 2-bedroom, and another 1-bedroom. And then this is the third floor. So the same layout as below, basically. Each unit again has their own balcony. And the only difference here, unit 2B will have a stairwell up to the rooftop. They'll have their own private roof deck space. That's around 50 square feet. But otherwise, the roof is just HVAC. And then we have elevations. Happy to go through. Let me go to a different page. So we have front elevation, our side elevation. So all these different colored lines show the height. And so we're subject to the transitional height. We face the R1 zone behind the alleyway. So the pink dash line is the 33-foot height limit from the R1 zone. So we're mostly compliant, but we are asking for an increase in height. The overall building height is 40 feet. So there's also an additional height limit in the village plan for 2 stories or 30 feet. And then additionally, there's another height limit that the top of the ceiling, it's probably better shown here. The top of the ceiling for the second floor can only be 27 feet. And our ceiling height to the upper story would be 34 feet. And then the back just showing again the stairwell access and the two balconies and units. Just another section. I also forgot to mention there's ground floor or subterranean level residential storage rooms. So there's going to be six separate storage rooms for each of the units. So here we go. So they would just have access to their own private storage room downstairs. And I think those are the main. Oh, I want to go through the so as part of our submittal to planning, they after we filed, they asked us to do a shade and shadow study. So we just completed this, basically looking at. So here's Sunset Boulevard, and this is the alley behind the site. So north is this way. And these are the adjacent residential lots behind, and then this is across Sunset. So we did three different studies. One of them was in the spring, the summer, and the fall and the winter. So we took 4 different times of the day from 9 a.m., 12 p.m., 3 p.m. And planning asked us to model, if buildings were built back at their height limit, which we're assuming around two floors or 30 feet. This is what the shadows would look like at different times of the day. So for the most part, there's really no shadow issues that seem to appear. Maybe just the only one would be, in the fall and the winter at 5 and 3 p.m., there'd be some minor shade from the three-story building along the back portion of the backyard here. But otherwise, it appears, to be pretty much no shadowing beyond that, public street. So. Anyway, I think that's really my presentation. I can go into more detail if you like, but I'm happy to stop there and go through any questions.
Well, thank you so much. Did the architect wish to make another presentation, or should we begin questions now? I didn't know if he had something more
Um,
he wanted to add.
Andrew, would you like to go through the elevations a bit in more detail, or I can go through? I think you might be on mute, Andy.
Well, let me just ask Nick while we're waiting for that. I believe Sue asked a question in the chat, which I think is important. What is the studio one of the very low income unit? Will that be one of the studios?
Um, it might be. We're not sure yet. There's the way the process works is the LA Housing Department doesn't confirm which unit is the affordable one until after we get, if we're approved, and we then at that point process a land use covenant with the housing department, and then that's when they inform us of which unit it would be. But since we only have one affordable unit here, it would most likely be the studio.
Okay, any other questions from the board? Let's start with the board. Howard, or rather the committee. Sorry. Howard, you're muted. Howard, we need you to unmute.
Okay. Thanks for the presentation, Nick. You mentioned that the density bonus you're not taking advantage of any extra density. What about floor area? Are you getting any extra floor area as one of your incentives?
For this one, I do not believe so. We comply with the 2-to-1 FAR for the village plan. Yeah, so the FAR allowed for the site is 2, and we are at 1.99.
Okay. And I noticed that of the six parking spaces, two of them are provided by lifts. And
Correct.
back when I was a land use consultant, I used to propose that when necessary based on the site. But they never get used really, or rarely. Um, can you explain what are the parking requirements in this context, the residential and the commercial, and and who would be using those lifts?
Yeah, so I can go down to our parking calculations further. But yeah, the parking is going to be determined by the village plan. So there's a ratio, or here it's by square footage of the unit. And so for the residential portion of our project, there would technically be 9 spaces required, and we are going to be including 6 spaces. And then so I'm assuming, and we'll have to work on this during operational plans, but most likely the 2-bedroom units would use the 2 spaces that have the stacker on it. So it's our goal is to get every unit 1 parking space. And then for the commercial, given it's around 2,000 square feet, that's around 8 spaces that would be required. That is one of our incentives to reduce that to 0. So we would only be including 6 parking spaces, just given it's such a small site. We can't fit it anywhere. So that's why we went for the stacker at least to try and fit 2 more spaces on there.
So
So
go ahead, Howard.
if if each two-bedroom unit gets 2 spaces utilizing the lift, and then there's only two more spaces, that's only providing housing for four of the units. Is that right?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I did misspeak. Yeah, yeah.
Wait,
Okay.
you're only providing parking for 4 of the units. Is that right?
At the moment, that's how it would appear, or there'd have to be some type of way that the lift can operate separately without the other resident. So,
Well,
but
if I may interject, so where are other residents supposed to be parking? There are or there had been before the fire, several parking restrictions in that neighborhood, in the residential neighborhood, which Sue Cole was responsible for getting for the residents years ago. So I'm sure that will continue. And there's obviously on Sunset Boulevard restrictions. So have you
yeah, that's
thought about
true.
that?
I'll look into that more. I don't know I don't know if apartment buildings are eligible for those parking districts, but I'll double check on that.
You're saying that
But
the
we
people in the
might be able
parking,
to,
the
yeah.
people in the apartment buildings would get special permits to park along the streets there? I mean, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think that I've seen that happen sometimes, but I do want to double check that.
Okay.
But
Howard,
just so that we're clear, if that doesn't work out, then you're really providing parking for four out of the six units, and you just two of the units won't have any parking.
Yeah,
Oh, that's that'll be an
but
interesting feature
there
when
might be
you
a, there might be
imagine.
a way there might be a way where if there's like an on-site valet or someone there that operates the lift so that every unit does get a space, but just two of them would have to share. So,
Well, I am aware that nowadays that there are many examples of projects that do not provide parking for every unit. Um, some projects are built with zero parking
mhm.
when that's allowed.
On
And
transit corridors, not in the
but
Pacific Palisades.
but I just want to just bring everybody's attention to the parking
Yeah, thank
situation.
you. Thank you, Howard. That was concern of mine too. So I want to let Joanna have her question.
Yeah, I just had a couple quick ones. And since you already brought up parking, I was interested in understanding how the lifts work since they are right across the alley from a residential lot. How noisy are they? And, are they going to be used in the middle of the night? That kind of thing. I just don't understand how they work. And then my second question was, I just want to confirm that you're not going to have a rooftop deck for use by the residents, that it's solely for mechanical.
Correct. So, to answer the parking lift, I can double check if there's any noise issues with it, but it is what we are going to be using is a LA like sort of already pre-approved model from that, building and safety allows. So I can look into the sound issue. I'm sure that's come up before. Um, and then your second question was regarding the or the rooftop.
Yeah.
The rooftop deck, there's a very small private rooftop deck just for one of the residential units that's accessed inside the unit. So people from the public can't go up there and it'd be private. So there's maybe a way to like condition hours of usage, but there's also otherwise, there's nothing else on the roof. It's just HVAC and maybe solar. But yeah,
And Nick, I would add to that it's orientated on the sunset side of the property, not on the alley and looking down upon the neighbors.
Got it. Thank you.
hmm
Let me just interject a question that was in the chat just now. I think I know the answer. The person is asking whether there are any height variances being sought, and you're not seeking any variances, right? Is that correct?
Well, we are from yes, but we're in the density bonus world, they're called incentives or waivers.
Right,
But
that it's
it's
different from a
functioning like
traditional
a variance.
variance, correct? It's different from what we think of as a traditional variance.
It is so. Because we're including one very low income unit, we're allowed to request different deviations as needed to make the project feasible. So if we couldn't get the additional height increase above the zone, then we couldn't fit the affordable unit or the other units too. And so that's how that kind of program, gives you an incentive, aka sometimes a waiver. In this case, that they're just the way the program works is you request four incentives and then waivers beyond that if you need to comply with whatever zoning it is that is on the site. So we'll be going through a city planning commission review process because of that waiver list. And like for example, one of them was to remove there's a landscaping buffer requirement along the rear parking lot. And so if we had to comply with that, we wouldn't even be able to provide any parking. So that's one of the things that we, had to include on our application to, deviate from in order to make the project feasible.
Okay. Any more questions from committee members? And maybe you can speak out because I can't see everyone right now.
I'm assuming that there's no requirement for off-street parking for the commercial as there was when Caruso did his.
There is an off-street parking requirement for this project. And that's one of our incentives too, is to reduce the commercial parking only though. So yes, I see a question in the chat about for the retail store, people would most likely use street meter parking or park nearby.
Or use the Ralph's parking lot. There's been a problem in the past, but look, we won't get into that now. Other questions from the committee? And then I would like to open it up to questions from the audience as well. All right, so do any audience members have questions? And what I would ask is maybe you can put that what you're showing down so I can see people.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Okay. Does anybody in the audience have a question? I don't see anyone with a question. Okay. Oh, there's a question from Scott Cullen. Why don't you unmute yourself, please?
Hey, thanks, Chris. Hey, one question I have. So you've got a number of residential units essentially, and we're talking about parking. How do we know that on these residential units, you're going to only have one person living there? What if two people live in each of those units? Where will they park? Also, have the people on Embry been notified about this project?
For the parking, it's not really finalized yet. I mean, we haven't gotten into that like operational aspect yet, but theoretically, you know, if the parking would be like unbundled. So if you have a lease, you're not required to receive a space. It's optional. So if there's not enough parking available, then that person renting the unit would know that, and that they know they're not going to receive a space.
And so they'll just park on Embry then, and that will be restricted parking, or so that's what I'm wondering. If people
Right.
on Embry, are they aware? Because
This is our first meeting, so I've not done official outreach with them, but knowing that the parking there is permitted, I will look into that
yeah,
and start reaching out to them.
yeah, there's not a whole lot of parking spaces. So I'm imagining if every commercial entity on that section of Sunset did the same thing you're doing, I guess you'd set precedents, right? How is that going to affect not only density, but just congestion? And that alley.
Yeah, I think, sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I was just going to say, yeah, it's definitely going to be a tricky balance just with other commercial projects that will be rebuilt on Sunset. Most of them, I assume, will use the Executive Order 1, where they can build back the parking that they had. They don't have to comply with the newer parking standards. So a lot of these buildings were older and didn't have a ton of off-street parking. So we did our best to, include five or include six spaces before the project or the building had five along the back of the alley. And also in terms of like, intensity of use, like I think the previous project would maybe have a higher, commercial parking demand versus six residential units where people may work from home or not be, visiting and leaving every 30 minutes. So,
So previous, you just had 2 stories there. So now we're going 3 stories, right? Why
well,
don't
I mean, sorry, I guess to clarify, there was double commercial space. There's probably 4 or 5,000 square feet, whereas right now we only have 2,000 square feet. So it'll be a relatively small
Nick, let me
commercial.
interject. There were 10 units before, 10 commercial units. So,
in that space?
correct.
Yeah. So
do you mind? All right. Scott, can you wrap it up because we have other people with
No,
questions?
you go ahead. Oh, I'm glad to have other people interject. I was just filling the space and somebody was raising their hand. I'm sure
Okay,
others have valuable input.
we have others
Oh,
raising their hand. Well, first I want to call on Lori Kuzzle. She's a board member. Go ahead, Lori. Unmute, please.
Sorry. Okay, thanks a lot, Chris. I just wanted to actually, because Steve said something great in the chat, which is something that I would like. I have a question about this as well, but he says it really well. Setting aside parking and the unusual height, both of which will negatively impact the neighborhood, has consideration been given to keeping the style more traditional and keeping with the pre-existing neighborhood? I had that same question. Like, is there going to be any community input as to what it's going to look like?
Oh yeah, definitely. We still have to go through the design review board, so that could take several meetings. It's probably not going to happen for another couple months. So there will be other opportunities. That's where that board really looks at the finer details. So yeah, there's definitely we can think about any changes that are needed.
Can I just interject so everyone understands the design review board holds public meetings and everyone can come and express your opinion to them. I'm sure they'll want to hear from you.
Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. We have to finish a couple of things with city planning first, and then they'll schedule us. I don't think they've been meeting yet, the DRB. So I'm trying to find out schedule on that. But yeah, I'll keep you guys posted.
Yeah, we usually get the notices.
And it's not noticing too. Yeah.
And our advisor to this committee is the chair of the DRB,
Oh,
Richard,
okay.
who's an
Right.
architect himself, but he did not come to this meeting because he does not want to, complicate matters for the DRB. They're not supposed to be talking about projects that are coming before them, so he's not here. All right, so we have two other callers. We have or people with questions. Rena, do you want to go ahead?
Sure, thank you. Thanks, Nick. Nick, can you just because there was a lot of information overviewed, can you just review all of the incentives and waivers that you will be requesting on the basis of the one low income residential unit for this project? I couldn't really keep track. It sounded like permission to not include any parking for the commercial space, which will have fewer but larger units, it sounds like. No parking for two of the six residential units. And what were the others? If you could just go through them each. Was it height? I couldn't really keep track.
Yeah, sorry about that. There's a lot of details. I didn't want to take up time, but I can share my screen again if that's okay. So the top paragraph, excuse me, the top paragraph here are the four different, excuse me, the four different incentives. One of them is a height increase. So that would be a total 40-foot tall building. That's in lieu of the 30-foot height limit per the zone. We have a second height limit increase that would allow us to go up to 35 feet instead of 27 feet for the top of the ceiling and the upper story. That's part of the village plan. The third incentive is to provide zero commercial parking for the site. The fourth incentive is to reduce open space to allow us to provide that 50 square foot rooftop deck. Additionally, we have a decrease on the two side yards along the two other commercial buildings. So basically, it would be building back to what it was to 0 feet. The third is to not provide a loading zone along the alley. We just can't fit it we can't have, mechanical lifts with a different loading zone. And the other request was to reduce the residential parking to 6 spaces. And then the last was to remove that landscape buffering requirement along the parking lot in the back that would face the alleyway. So we couldn't provide any parking at all. That's the case. And I'm happy to provide that list or any more details if needed.
Let me just interject here. So, Nick, we provided a link to your application materials that are on ZEMIS, the Planning Department website ZEMIS. That is in our preliminary report under the resources. Are all of these things listed in those materials so people could go to those if they wanted?
Yeah, they should be, and if they're not, let me know and I can send it to you.
Well, I'll probably get, yeah, okay. The other question I have is, as to these incentives and waivers, these are all basically non-discretionary. In other words, they're not subject to hearing, and, discussion of any kind. They just
No,
are.
they are definitely. Yeah, no, they're not guaranteed, but we do go through City Planning Commission review and process with staff. We go through the design review board as well. So they're not like automatically approved, but technically they do go through City Planning Commission. And there are state laws though that really have strong findings the city would have to make to deny the
Yeah,
waivers.
that's my question. We've been told
Yeah.
there are so much that this the city has to find in terms of public safety impacts and that kind of thing before any of these requests would could be denied. That's really my question.
Yeah. Yes, that's true.
Okay, so and some of that is listed in some of the materials that we provided in our
Yeah, but with like the design review board, that is much more like subjective. So there's like opportunity for comments on that.
Mhm. Okay, so
Scientific
we
scale. Yeah.
have Brian's iPhone, whoever Brian is, please.
Yeah. It sounds like this is really more by right. And so it's a little bit more of a comment than a question, but totally candidly, this whole thing feels a little disingenuous to me. You guys clearly designed a project that is underparked and is even getting past the 40-foot height thing. It's clearly underparked. And we know that there's not abundant parking nearby. And it feels like you just shoehorned in the very low income unit to take advantage of the density bonus and underpark the project, which you'll get away with because of the density bonus for the very low income unit. But you're going to stick the neighborhood then with a project that is towering over the neighbors and is just underparked, and the excess need for parking is going to go into the Ralph's parking lot, which they can't. They're going to crowd up the alphabet streets, which are already tight on parking, and it just the whole thing feels a little disingenuous. And unless you're truly looking for community input, in which case you're clearly underparked.
Yeah, it's definitely a sensitive issue, and it's also a problem with other Executive Order 1 projects that would come in at some point if they use it, because they could build back the parking that they had, and everything in that area is like underparked. Just because the new village or relatively recent village plan requires a lot more parking. So a lot of these older buildings were really our grandfather then. So when they are rebuilt to what they had, they're gonna most likely build the parking that they had at the moment. And I think this site has a lot of access to parking on Sunset for the commercial tenant, and then just in general, there was a lot more commercial. I think there were 10 different tenant spaces at this building. So
Well,
I
my yeah,
think
my
with
comment, if you're really looking for community input, my comment is you are definitively underparking this project, and you guys should really look to add some parking somehow, some way, because
yeah, okay.
that count quantity of retail space and that number of units. The idea that you're going to lease a unit with no parking on something that really doesn't have significant public transportation nearby, that's just a shoehorn thing. So my comment is you guys really should search for a way to add more parking. You're under parking the project.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I didn't explain this part as well, but we did look at building a subterranean level to provide more parking, but the site, it's only 49 feet wide, and we can't comply with the parking design to include a ramp and the turning radius and all that, we would actually probably have less parking, and again, just not be feasible to include. But we'll see if there's any other options.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments from anybody in the audience?
Hi, it's Steve again. I'm not a real estate lawyer, but it seems like the group is under the impression that these are all required to be approved. And in my short Googling, it seems that these exceptions, which were listed as off menu on the plan, are only allowed if they're necessary to allow for the construction of the project. And I'm just wondering why each of these exceptions are actually required. For example, with parking, like you could park underneath the second story, right? You would just be required to reduce the amount of retail space. So I don't know what the standard is under that, but maybe you can explain how all those factors are weighed.
Explain how the factors are waived. Like, sorry.
Yeah, so I mean, the standard for an off-menu incentive is that the project wouldn't be able to be constructed
Oh,
unless they granted.
okay. Yeah. So, for example, if we were not able, so if we were just to go out there today and try and build a project from scratch that wasn't using any of the fire rebuild allowances and just build a project that was per the zone, um, we wouldn't be able to even build what is zone there. So we couldn't even build a regular two-story office building again with how the zoning is today. So either way, we can't even build a two-story project because we have this weird 27-foot ceiling height limit. There's another height limit that doesn't allow us to, build to the top of the building. With the parking that's required, we'd have to go underground, which would make the project infeasible as we can't fit a driveway ramp and have enough space for cars to back up and go out. So there's a lot of different reasons why, these incentives are needed because otherwise nothing's feasible to be built with today's zoning code for the site. So the building that was there today, or before, was really a grandfathered in building. It was built in the 1950s when there wasn't this village plan. So if you were to go back today, you couldn't rebuild that what you had. So the other option would be to only build just a two-story apartment or a two-story office building again using the executive order one for the fire rebuild. But instead, our client wanted to pursue one, additional apartment units and make a mixed-use building that would really help the area, we thought. But we're happy to do more outreach. We're just getting started with this, so it's good to hear all the comments and see what the main focus is.
Yeah, so Nick, what I hear, and anybody on this call can correct me if I'm wrong, but what I hear is obvious concern about underparking, about, even the mechanical lift, the noise that may provide, or the distraction it may provide. Some of these things, all of it's tied to the parking issues. So I would suggest you really should go back to the drawing board on some of these things. That's just my informal opinion. It's not the opinion of this committee, and I don't know that we're going to reach an opinion today. I would also suggest that we want to wait and hear what the DRB thinks about all this before we take an opinion or make any kind of recommendation. But definitely informally, you guys have heard a lot here tonight, and you definitely should go back and rethink the parking, in my view.
Okay, we're happy to look into it more.
Howard.
I have a comment and a question. The comment is, I don't know if it's even allowable, but at the Caruso project, they have a lot of extra parking. They went down 3 levels of subterranean, you may be able to lease some parking there, at least for the employees of the commercial units. It's not that far of a walk. And then the question is, um, did you did you max out what would be available under the various incentives available to you, or did you hold back and build a slightly smaller project? And could you explain, if you did, could you explain what the max would have been compared to what you're proposing?
Sure. So regarding the density, we comply with what's allowed by right. So we have 6 units. With the floor area, we comply with what's allowed by right. So we didn't maximize those above anything. For the height, we've only increased it by 1 story. But we could have gone higher if we could have make it 4 or 5. When you get into that kind of territory, you can make more of these unique requests. But in our case, we only requested 1 story additional, and otherwise, any other incentive for the setbacks was standard of what's typically allowed when you build that type of building for the zone. And then the other one was really regarding the landscape or the backyard landscape buffer that would prevent us from accessing the alleyway for parking. So to answer your question, we've tried our best to build like what's compliant with the village plan, but there's just very nuanced standards that prevent any normal building today to be rebuilt.
All right. Rena do you have another comment?
Yeah. Yes, I had another question for Nick. Nick, what is the plan for loading for the commercial space, given that one of your incentives or waivers is no loading zone on the alley? And then my second question is, in addition to what is the plan for loading, does the fact that you're asking for this particular waiver about no loading zone limit the kind of commercial use that you can put in that space?
So we are technically asking to not include a loading zone just because we can't fit within the box that the city like requires you to, but we will have loading there temporarily for any kind of drop-offs, and we're happy to set hours for that business. So we will have loading along the alley, but we just can't technically say we comply with like the appropriate, dimension and all that. But there is space on the alley for loading. And it's how the site always has like operated.
Sorry, but could you just show us that on your
Oh, sure.
PowerPoint? Thanks.
So this is the alleyway. And so the previous building had the same parking layout. They had 5 spaces in a row. One of them I don't believe was ADA, so we had to make this one a bit wider. But yeah, it's the same layout as before. So there will be loading, but we can't technically put it on a plan here without not qualifying for that with the city dimension, if that makes sense.
I'm sorry. No, it doesn't.
So
If there are cars parked in those spots, and then there's the ADA space for loading and unloading, say someone with a wheelchair, I'm not seeing where the loading will take place for the commercial space. I'm just
yeah, it would
saying
take place
something you're
behind
saying.
yeah, so there would be a loading area behind the parking spaces. It's permissible from the city to allow parked cars behind spaces for a temporary moment, but I can double check that. We just can't officially show the loading area box because we don't fit that dimension. We'd have to we just would not fit it because the site is so narrow and shallow. So
Okay, thank
Okay, thank you. Um, Any other questions? All right, so what I'd like to do is thank you all for coming. You're welcome to stay. I think we might have a brief discussion about what the LUC should do going forward.
Chris, Scott has one more question, I think.
Oh, okay. Go ahead, Scott.
If you have time. So, the other thing I was wondering, you kind of mentioned 2 stories. Is that just unprofitable for you guys? I mean, it's more in character with the legacy of the Palisades. Is that something that you guys just can't consider? And in addition to that, is the low to moderate income housing allowing you to go 3? In other words, no low to moderate if you go 2. That would be my question.
We could, well, do you want to answer Brad or Josh about the apartments?
Well, I
But
mean, I think this has been such a warm welcome from the community. It's kind of crazy. I didn't ask for this building to be burned down at all. I'm a victim here too. So is Josh. We're trying to do the best we can do with this property. I think that building a 2-story building there, we would have to go through entitlement again for a 2-story building if we wanted to build it above the 10% bonus for the height. Is that correct, Nick?
yeah, you could build it larger a little bit if you were to follow that. Yeah.
So we have a small business loan, we have carrying costs. Going through entitlement to build a 2-story building for a 4-year process is painful for us, candidly. You know, I'm willing to listen to what you guys want to say about parking. We wanted to go underground. We can't go underground. I think, Andrew, can you explain about the angle of the back alley, because it's elevated, how we don't have the ability to actually make a ramp?
Yeah, so the back alley, you guys can hear me now, right?
Yes.
Okay, great. The back alley is elevated about 4 feet above Sunset. So in order to get a ramp from the back alley down to, say, 10 feet underneath the lower floor elevation on Sunset, the length of that, we barely fit a ramp. I don't even think we fit the ramp, a speed ramp, to get down in that length because of the depth of our property. And then the width, we just can't get the turning radius with parking along there. Once we get that, lay out a driveway, a 2-way driveway, and the turning radius, we're only really getting the same amount of parking that we're providing in the alleyway. It's not increasing it. It's just kind of a function of the geometry of the property and the elevation change. Does that make sense to people?
The other option was to make the first floor parking, right, Andrew? To actually take away space to make parking.
Yeah, you would still need to ramp down, right, to get down from the alley down to the Sunset sidewalk elevation. So, yeah, it's just the nature of the site.
It's a 5,000 square foot lot. So, their economics are certainly a consideration here. We're not trying to develop a 5-story building in the Palisades, but there are some economic realities about this fire. I mean, this is an absolute nightmare for us. And, it's not what I wanted. We had actually had plans to convert the upstairs. We were literally, I think, a couple days into demolition for the conversion of the building into what we were going to build, which was 3 units upstairs and a nicer retail space on the bottom. But I'm surprised to have so much of the, well, I guess I'm not surprised, but it's wild. Just like the negative response we're getting here.
I have to interrupt here, Brad. We very much appreciate your coming. I personally appreciate what you're saying, but residents have legitimate concerns, especially about parking. That was already conveyed. It is not that they're being antagonistic. We're not trying to be antagonistic, and I don't want to be antagonistic. But I really do appreciate your coming and explaining your position. All right, Kimberly, one more thing, and then we're going to go on to discussion.
Yeah, thanks. In all due respect, Brad, I have a 5,000 square foot lot on Fisk, and I can't imagine a structure as large as yours on my lot. Now I know you're in the commercial section, and I think it's wonderful that you do want to rebuild it and make it look nice for us. But I think also, people are just very concerned about density and lack of parking because of our horrible evacuation that was not safe on January 7th. And so you have to realize, there's still a lot of fear and anxiety around fire safety and evacuation and density. So by putting 6 apartments on a 5,000 square foot lot, you are indeed adding a density. I hope you can figure